It is absolutely beautiful out here. That is the first time and probably one of the only times you'll hear me say that about Houston, Texas. As you saw in the beginning of the video, myself and Dan, he's never really fired a gun or even seen a gun. He's from the UK, so it's cool to get him to the ranch, play around with some guns. And he brought up a good question on the way to the ranch, and I figured, you know what, I'm gonna make a quick video. He was asking me, you know, what's the difference between financing and leasing? And I get that question probably like 2 or 3 times a week, to be honest. So I'm gonna explain from my perspective when I decide to do one or the other, what I prefer. Also, I'm no expert in this. I've just bought, at this point, like 18 cars, so I'm just kind of used to that world. I sold cars for a little bit, but I'm by no means like an expert in finances and stuff. So if I kind of fuck something up here, comment down below and correct me, I'd appreciate it. So, the difference between financing a car and leasing a car. When you finance a car, you're buying it, right? So you're gonna apply for a loan through a bank. The bank is gonna loan you X amount of money, let's call it $50,000 for this case. They're gonna loan you that $50,000 for X amount of months, which is the term of the lease. For this example, we'll say 36 months, so 3 years. And you're gonna pay an interest rate to borrow that money for the 3 years. So if you're borrowing $50,000, you're gonna get, let's say, a 5% interest rate, and you're gonna pay back that $50,000 plus 5% over the course of 36 months. And that is where your monthly payment comes from. You own the car. The bank is giving you a check for the money. You're buying the car. In a lot of cases, they don't actually do that. It just happens through the dealership. But the car is yours. There's a loan out on the car, but you own the car. In a lease scenario, and I'm talking strictly new car leases here, for the most part, most of you guys, when you're talking about a lease, you're gonna be leasing a brand new car from a franchise dealership, so BMW, Mercedes, something like that. When you lease a car, you are essentially paying to drive the car for X amount of months. So in a lease, you know, a typical term would be 36,000 miles, 36 months. Essentially with a lease, you are paying to drive that car for 3 years and put 36,000 miles on it. And at the end of that, they're gonna give you a residual. That is how much they are estimating the car is gonna be worth at the end of the 3 years and the 36,000 miles you put on it. So just a quick example to put these numbers into play. You're buying a 5 Series BMW for $50,000. At the end of 3 years and 36,000 miles, they think the car is gonna be worth let's call it $20,000. You're essentially gonna pay that depreciation factor of $30,000 to drive it for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, you can either buy it for the residual, which would be $20,000. So at the end of the 3 years, you can say, hey, I love the car, I'm gonna buy it for 20, what I owe. Or you just give them the car back and you do the process again, or you buy or do whatever you want. Make sure you do not do an open-ended lease. You always wanna make sure that residual is locked down. So a lot of people don't know the difference. They go in, they're excited, they do a lease. The residual, let's say, is $30,000 on a $50,000 car. They think they're all good. They walk out the door and they're happy about it. If it's an open-ended lease, which is very rare nowadays because dealerships got in a lot of trouble for doing it, but it's not really illegal. So a lot of people would have an open-ended lease, so that residual could change. So 3 years from now, when you went to take that BMW back, if really it was worth less than they thought it was going to be worth, or if the car was worth less because you got maybe a fender bender and there was an accident in the Carfax, they would actually drop the residual value and tell you you owe them the difference. So you would go in thinking, you know, I'm done, I give them the keys, I'm out. And really they tell you, hey, actually you owe us $15,000 because it's worth less now. So make sure you get a closed-ended lease. That's like my most important tip here. Don't let the dealership fuck you over on that one. So now real quick, when do I prefer one over the other? Right now in the US, 2017 going into 2018, it is not uncommon to see banks handing out auto loans under 2%, under 3%. They're pretty much giving away money right now for cars. So I pretty much always stick to financing. However, there are some exceptions. If you are a business owner, you own your own company, actually do a lease through your company as a company car and get yourself a nice little tax write-off. So that is one scenario where I'd recommend leasing. Another one is if you're buying a very heavily depreciating car brand new. So you're gonna buy that 650S McLaren. You know, you buy it, you're gonna lease it for maybe 12 months and your payment's gonna be $3,000 a month. At the end of the 12 months, you hand them the keys and you're done. In that scenario, yeah, you lost $36,000 driving that car for a year, but essentially you just paid $36,000 to drive it for a year and at the end you're done. If you would have bought that car at $350,000, 12 months down the road with 5,000 miles on it, maybe it's only worth like 180, 200,000, so you lost 150,000 in that case. So really heavily depreciating cars, if you want to buy them brand new, you're dead set on buying a brand new, probably do a lease. It makes more sense there. As long as the residual is somewhat decent, I mean, they may try to fuck you on that, but as long as it's decent, I recommend that. Third scenario, I would lease if maybe you're just graduating college, you don't really have any credit history, or maybe you don't have any credit history at all. A lot of these dealerships will offer you a lease. They're a little bit more lenient with a lease as far as your credit history and income and stuff like that. So if you want that new car, but maybe you necessarily don't have the credit history to do it, you may be able to get a lease over financing. Or if you just have really shitty credit and the finance rate is super high, like you're getting offered like 9% or 10% on a loan, I definitely wouldn't do that. At that point, maybe a lease is a better option. Financing for every other scenario, especially if you're gonna mod out your car, is the way to go. You can mod out a leased car. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're gonna expect it to be back to stock when you hand the keys back in, or they're not gonna pay you anything for what you've done. So if you're gonna invest a lot of money into your car, I would recommend buy it, don't lease it. There is a third option here, and that is to buy a car outright. Some people favor this, or some people that refuse to take loans, they don't want any debt, and I understand that. At the same time, cars are depreciating assets, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to tie up all your money in a car. In my mind, it never really makes sense to just buy a car outright, with the exception you don't have any credit, you just came out of high school or college, and you just need a ride. You don't care what it is, you just need some wheels to get around, maybe get yourself to that new job or whatever. In that case, buy it cash. If you're buying a car like under 10,000, under 20,000, just buy it cash and don't worry about it. So that's my take on it. A lot of people ask me all the time, they're looking at buying a new car, they lease or they finance or they buy it outright. Hopefully this video kind of answered some of those questions. Out of the 18 cars that I've owned at this point, they've all been financed. Typically put 10 to 20% of the value of the car down, finance the rest. And I personally always try to buy cars that are not really heavily depreciating. I'll make a whole nother video about this, but if you've noticed, pretty much all the cars I've owned have been like limited edition special cars that aren't depreciating as bad as some other cars on the market. So that's another one of my tips. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and catch you guys in the next one.